What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. We're going into the prison world. If you've never been here before, please check out plenty of the videos I have up. Hit the subscribe button. Stay tuned with me. We're going into prison, Mid-Orange Correctional Facility in this one. For those of you that have never been here before, I served 17 years in the New York State Department of Corrections. Most of those years was in the maximum security prison system. And I'm going to talk about a nasty fight, one of the nasty fights, because sometimes people enjoy a good fight story. So I'm going to go to one of the nasty fights I had. And this one was not good because I was about 30 to 40 days away from the parole board to earn my release for parole. And as I always say, I never looked for the fight in prison. I was not a troublemaker. I did not go out of my way looking for issues. But when they were brought to me, I handled my business. And that is the way that I lived most of my life. I didn't look for it. And so let me get right into this story and let me tell you a little bit about Mid-Orange Correctional Facility in itself as well. I might as well tell you a little bit about the prison. Mid-Orange prison is a medium security prison. It's closed now. It's not open anymore. It actually closed down while I was in the prison. The governor decided to close some prisons, and he closed like 5 prisons at the time. They were, for financial reasons. And I was in Mid-Orange when they decided to close it down. And they would just bring buses in, put 30, 40, 50 of us on a bus and ship us out to another prison. And it was a crazy experience. But when I get to Mid-Orange, medium security prison, uh, when the bus is pulling in for the first time, I see prisoners walking dogs around. I had never seen that. I had like 12 years in prison at the time, 13 years in prison at the time, whatever it was. And I see prisoners walking dogs because they had a program there called PBB, which was Puppies Behind Bars. And for those of you that don't know, I spent many years as a dog trainer before my incarceration.
But now give him a little. Oh, bravo. Now pull tight. Then pull tight. There you go. Enjoy yourself, Joe. You're having fun. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy.
Good heel. Good heel. Front. Front. Good boy. Let's go. Let's go. Front. Heel. Good boy. Good boy. I got together at about 13 years old with a guy that trained for the United States military. I met him in my neighborhood, and I worked with very serious dogs. I trained hundreds of dogs in my life for explosive detection to help wounded war veterans, felony apprehension, and dogs are my number one love in life. But so when I find the dogs in the prison, I can't believe it. I ended up in the dog program and doing a lot of work in the dog program for a while. That's another story in itself. So Mid-Orange, there was a nickname for Mid-Orange, and it was called the best kept secret in the Department of Corrections. And the reason for that was several. This was a medium security prison where they housed lifers. A lot of medium security prisons don't take prisoners who are serving a life sentence. Most of those guys stay in the maximum security prison system. But Mid-Orange Correctional Facility was one of the medium security facilities that took lifers. And that makes for a better facility, because what that meant was guys, let's say they were sentenced to 15 years to life, they were sentenced to 20 to life, they were sentenced to 25 to life. Once they did the bulk of their time, once they served 10, 15, 20 years, and they became medium eligible, they became eligible for a medium security prison. Mid-Orange was one of those facilities that took them. And this means you had a lot of guys in there that knew how to serve prison time. You had a lot of guys in there that knew how to move inside a prison, and they earned their way to a medium security prison, either because they weren't a troubled prisoner or because they were smart enough to do time without getting noticed or out getting caught, and they made their way to a medium, and they didn't want any problems. They were serving life. They were happy to be in a medium. So that was one thing that made the prison really decent. The second thing that made the prison decent is there was some really good correctional officers in Mid Orange Correctional Facility. The officers were the same way. They were guys that served that on the job 10 years, 20 years already, and they wanted to go to a prison where there was no drama. And because they had that seniority, they would put in to go to Mid Orange, and then so now you had a prison filled with a lot of officers that did time, and a lot of prisoners that did time, and nobody was rubbing each other the wrong way. There weren't a lot of incidents there. I never saw a murder there. I don't even know if I saw a stabbing there, and I was there for about 4 or 5 years. There were fights there. There was some cuttings there, but they were few and far between. It was the best kept secret in the Department of Corrections. There was a lot of gangsters there. There was a lot of made men from the mob there, and so the cooking was good. The food was good. We used to drink wine. We used to get steak. We used to get lobsters. Yeah, like Goodfellas. It was pretty nuts. Mid Orange was nuts. They had cottages there. All right. So yeah, it was a good place to do time. So let me get to the fight, right? Because this was about a fight, right? I'm not, as I said, I'm not looking for a fight. I'm 30. I think I was between 30 or 60 days from a parole board. And so, I'm just trying to, skate my way through the system and mind my own business. And so a kid comes at the time, I guess I'm about 38 years old, maybe 40 years old. I'm somewhere around that area. And this kid comes into the prison, and his nickname was Buck, and they called him Buck because he was like from upstate New York. You know what I mean? Like one of these hunter type kids. But he was 19 years old, and he was serving a short sentence. He was serving a sentence of like 2 years, 3 years, somewhere in there, 2 to 4 years, short sentence. And but the kid comes in, and he's got a big mouth, really big mouth. But so prisoners come to me all the time. He doesn't know where he's at. It's his first time in prison. He's running his mouth like he's a tough guy because he's working out with weights. He's a big kid, and he's the Spanish guys come to me and they say, "Listen, if it wasn't for you, Fish, we're gonna punch this kid in the face, or we're gonna stab this kid. He's got a big mouth. He's disrespectful." And so I would go to him and say, "Buck, listen, you're in a prison with lifers. I know you never did prison time before, but you're in a prison with lifers. And a lot of these guys are just trying to do their time. So you got to watch your mouth." And he didn't get it, right? Oh, F them. I don't care. I said, okay, you're going to get hurt. You don't realize where you are. These guys are serious guys. And the black guys would come to me. The Spanish guys would come to me. Even some gang members would come to me. And I had a lot of respect in the prison because I had done a lot of time already. I did time through Sing Sing. I did time through Attica. I did time in some max prisons, for a long time. And so a lot of the guys knew me, and they knew the way I carried myself. And so they were like, "Yo, Fish, straighten this kid out, because if you don't straighten this kid out, he's going to get hurt." And I would go to Buck and explain this all the time, but it wouldn't register in his head because he was stupid, right? But we used to keep him near us anyway, kind of to look out for him, because he wasn't a rat. He wasn't a rapist. He wasn't a child molester. He wasn't a bad kid. He was actually in there for killing someone driving under the influence. It was his first time in trouble. And like I said, he got like 2 to 4 years or something like that. So I'll tell you an incident before the fight, actually. He was athletic. He was an athletic kid. And he was on the softball field, and he was playing center field, and he was running for the ball, and the other outfielder was running for the ball as well, and they collided with one another. And when they collided with one another, these are two 19-year-old kids running at full speed, and they smash into each other. And Buck does a helicopter in the air and lands on the ground, and I can tell right away he's seriously hurt. And so I run out there, and they have to take him out on a stretcher. And it turns out that his spleen ruptured, or was about to rupture. They had to take him out to the outside hospital immediately, and he almost died from it. They had to they had to cut him open from here to here, remove his spleen, and so he's in the outside hospital. And so I said, somebody's got to call his family and let them know, that this kid is hurt, because the prison's not going to call. The prison will call your family a week later. The prison don't, this is it. They don't give a shit. You know what I mean? They might have an obligation to call, but they'll get to it when they get to it. And this kid is hurt so bad from this freak accident that I said, let me call his family, right? And you're not allowed to do that. Okay, you're not allowed to access someone else's PIN number on the phone to call their family. But I'm able to get his PIN number. I'm able to get the number to his family, and I call his family and I say, listen, I don't know if the prison called you, which they did not. I said, but Buck was in a really bad accident. I heard he's in the hospital. I heard he's okay. I know they operated on him because a couple of the officers were giving me the word about what was going on. And so the family is extremely grateful, of course. Thank you so much. And they rushed to the hospital to go see their son. Well, the Department of Corrections finds out about this phone call, and they give me a tier 3 ticket. And a tier 3 ticket is like the most serious ticket you can get. They have tier 1s, tier 2s, and tier 3s. But for some reason, they gave me a tier 3 because they were really pissed. I guess that I embarrassed them, also that I broke the rule, but that I embarrassed them, and I also opened them up to a possible lawsuit. You know what I mean? And so they give me the tier 3 ticket. I go to a disciplinary hearing. I end up turning out all right. I don't get in a lot of trouble for it. I get in some trouble for it. But the hearing officer, Mr. Ford, was a civilian, and he understood. I said to him in the hearing, Mr. Ford, if that was your son, and your son was injured in prison, and your son needed surgery, and your son almost died, would you want someone to call you? Would you want one of the fellow prisoners to call you and let you know that your son was in an accident? That's all I'm saying. I know it was wrong. I know I wasn't supposed to do it, but I'm looking at it ethically, and I'm looking at it morally. And I felt I had an obligation, whether it was right or wrong, to call the family. And Mr. Ford was a good dude, and he gave me like 60 days loss of commissary or something like that, which is nothing. You know what I mean? So he gave me a break. But the point of that story is I went out of my way to look out for Buck, to make sure his family knew, even though this kid had a big mouth and was always in trouble, and I was always saving his life in the prison because everyone wanted to hurt this kid. And so now, fast forward, right? Uh, I'm in the gym early in the morning. Every morning, a group of us would go to the gym and we would play spades, right? And we're sitting around, it would be about 9 o'clock in the morning. After breakfast, they would call program. I didn't have, the guys that didn't have a morning program would either go to the yard or the gym. It was raining on this morning, so we went to the gym to go play cards. And I'm sitting around the card table with a couple of serious guys. Anthony is there. Anthony's a gangster, a made man. I'm sitting there with one of these big Russian guys, and this guy Rico is there with us. And we're there playing. We're playing spades, and sitting around the table as well is Buck and some other kid. I think his name was Chris. And as we're playing cards, Buck says to me, "Hey, Richie's going home tomorrow. Why don't you cook him dinner?" You see, it was when someone was getting ready to go home, we usually cook them a goodbye meal. We all sit down and have dinner. So he says, "Richie's going home tomorrow. Why don't you cook him dinner?" And it was almost not like a demand, like the way he was saying it. Now, I didn't hang out with Richie. Buck hung out with Richie. So I just turn around as I'm playing cards and I say to Buck, you hang out with him, so you should be the one to cook him dinner. And when I say that, he goes, "Who the F you talking to?" And so everybody at the table looks at me. This kid just cursed me out. This 19-year-old kid, and this is prison. This is prison. Everything is about respect. Everything is about being courteous, right? And when he says that to me, he goes, "Why don't you cook him effing dinner?" So I really think he's playing with me. I think he's just being his stupid self. And I say, "Listen, Buck, watch your mouth." You know what I mean? I says, "Don't talk to me like that. Watch your mouth." And he says, "What are you going to do about it?" and he gets up out of the chair, you know? And so he comes walking around the table and he's standing in front of me, right? He's standing right in front of me as I'm sitting like this. So now I have a kid who's 19 years old. You know, I'm twice his age. He's twice as young. He's twice as young as me. He's a big kid. He's in good shape, and he's cursing me out. And now he comes around the table to confront me. And so I get up out of the chair because I'm not going to be seated, right? So I get up out of the chair and I tell him, yo, listen, back away from me. So he doesn't notice two things that I do, right? Because he's young. The first thing I do is I put my arm out against his chest. So that's one, to create distance. All right. For those of you that don't know how to fight, you don't want to be chest to chest with someone or nose to nose with someone because they can take you out. You don't know what someone's capable of. And so what I do is I put my arm out and I keep them distance. And then I pivot my body. I don't stay square. You know, you don't want to be square so your whole body's a target. You want to get into a fighting stance. So I turn sideways and I put my arm out, and because I'm a lefty and I got my fist clenched right here, and I'm keeping distance. This way, if I have to hit him, you know what I mean. I've created a scenario where I'm in a good position, and so I tell him, "Yo, listen, Buck." I says, "Back up, watch him out. Don't talk to me like that." I said, "That's what I'm telling you." And all of a sudden, he throws his chest out like this, and he goes, "What the f are you gonna do?" You know, like to base up on me like that. So just as he does that, I have him lined up. I come across with a left hook. Whack! And when I come across with that, when I come across with that left hook, I as I always tell people, I'm only 5'6", 5'7", but I was about 220 pounds then, of solid muscle, in really good shape. And I was a boxer a lot of my life. I boxed, I wrestled, I did martial arts. And at this time, I'm in prison, hitting a heavy bag every day. So my shot is really good. I know how to throw a correct shot. And so when I come across, wham, I come across with everything I can. And I catch him right in the side of the jaw. And when I hit him, the crack was so loud that he was standing in front of the chair that he got up out of, and he went flying over the chair and hit the floor. Boom! It was so loud. I heard one of the Jamaicans go, Bomba clot, right? And boom, I catch him, and immediately the blood starts pouring out everywhere. He's knocked out. He's knocked out. So everyone gets up from the table. You know, the other prisoners are looking because there's 70, 80 prisoners in the gym. Everyone sees the shot or hears the shot when he hits the floor. So now let me tell you what transpires right after this. Thankfully, it happened as soon as we got into the gym, within 10, 15 minutes. So there were no officers downstairs in the gym. They were still all upstairs having their morning coffee and hanging out with one another. Usually one comes and sits down in the gym, but he wasn't there yet. So no officers see this. Right. So when I catch him, his face cracks open on the side. I crack the side of his face open. The second thing that happens is I look down at my hand, and when I look down at my hand, I see the bones inside of my hand. I'll try and take a picture of the wound and post it. If it's there, that's what happened to my hand right there. If it's not there, that means I couldn't get a good, clear picture of it. But my hand cracks open, and I'm looking at the bone. It just opened up like an inch and a half wide, right on the knuckle. And so I immediately know this is not good. The gangster, my buddy Anthony, and the Russian dude, they're picking Buck up. He's coming too. They're picking him up and they're bringing him into the slop sink to clean him up because there's blood all over the gym floor. I remember the Russian guy grabbing the mop, and he went to the slop sink, got the mop. He started mopping up the blood, and I said, let me go check on Buck before I get the hell out of here. And I run into the slop sink, and now he's half conscious, and he's, why'd you hit me? Why'd you hit me? That's how stupid this kid is. Whatever. I got no time for that right now. I got to get out of the gym. So it was raining that day. So I wrapped the rain jacket that I had around my hand, and I sneak out of the gym and I make my way to the recreational yard. You only have a few minutes to do this. This is prison. You can't just roam around at your own free will. And so I make my way to the yard, and I get to the yard. The first thing I do when I get to the yard is I go to where the officers are, and they're sitting in their booth having their morning coffee, and they see me. Hey, what's up, Fish? I said, what's up, guys? Everything good? You need the garbage taken out or anything like that? You see, I want them to see me in the yard. So I have a witness that I was in the yard, right? Now, no, they say, we're all right, Fish, no problem. Okay, good. So now I make my way into the bathroom to take a better look at my hand. And when I go into the bathroom, there's one of the homosexuals is in there, one of the fags is in there, and she said, "Hi, Fish. Hey, what's up? What's up?" And when I open my hand, I said, "It sees my hand and goes, oh my god!" I'll never forget that. It was so funny, you know. But I look and I say, "Oh, this is really bad." So I know that I can stitch it up myself if I have to. I can get a sewing needle and some dental floss, and I can stitch it up if I have to stitch it up. But I know it's going to get infected. It's really bad. I mean, I'm literally looking at the bone in my hand. It was like when you cut a fish and you open it up and you see inside. And so I wrap it back up, and I'm trying to, think about what I need to do, and it takes about 10 minutes, and over the speaker I hear the loudspeaker in the prison system. They say, report to the infirmary, report to the infirmary. So I have nowhere to run. Where am I going to go? I'm in prison. I got to go to the infirmary. I can't hide. So when I go into the infirmary, they don't even know what I'm doing there. They say, hey, Fish, what's up? I said, they called over the loudspeaker for me to go to the infirmary. They said, no, we don't want you here. The disciplinary building is attached to the infirmary. So I say, listen, I'm sure they want me in disciplinary. He goes back there. They find out that, yes, they want you back there. When I go back there, they immediately tell me, put your hands on the wall. So I said, listen, my hand is injured very badly. So they look at my hand. The nurse takes a look at it, says right away he's got to go to an outside hospital because they don't do stitches inside of the prison. And so they put me in a van. They shoot me to the outside hospital. When I get to the outside hospital, they stitch up my hand, and they take me to solitary confinement in another prison too. They ship me off to another prison called Ulster Box. Is You're in the box. You're in solitary confinement in Ulster County, New York. So they take me to Ulster Box. But what happened was the doctor made a bad mistake. Is he stitched up the wound in my hand tightly, and they say that you're never supposed to stitch a bite wound. And it was considered a bite wound because I hit him in the side of the jaw and his face opened up, and there was actually a little piece of his tooth inside of the hand. Even when they flushed it out, they didn't get it out. And so my hand got massively infected. And I end up going for 2 surgeries. I end up spending 30 days in the hospital from one punch, and had 2 surgeries on my hand from one punch. Right, the infection was making it all the way up my forearm. The skin was turning brown. They put me on antibiotics. The antibiotics weren't working. Then they put me on IV antibiotics, something called Cipro, and the Cipro started working, and it was in real bad shape. At one point, the doctor came into the room and said, listen, if the Cipro doesn't start working, he said, we will have to think about amputating your hand. I said, you have got to be kidding me, man. From one punch, right? But that's how nasty the human mouth is when the bacteria gets inside of your bloodstream. So thankfully, I still had my hand. I was more concerned with playing handball than anything. I said, listen, you can't take my hand. I got to play handball. You know what I mean? That was all I cared about. And so anyway, I end up doing the box time, and but I spent 30 days in the hospital, which wasn't that bad because while I was in the hospital, I was able to have sex with one of the nurses, which was definitely a bonus. And yeah, in the hospital, I'm not getting into that story. My channel's not a perverted channel, but what happened was I had a nurse there, and I get there at like 1 o'clock in the morning after I go to the hospital, and they have a prison ward there, and it's just for prisoners. It's in a regular hospital, but it's an area in the hospital that's just for prisoners. And they have a gate on the end, and there's one officer, and then they have 10, 15 hospital rooms that are just designated for people who are incarcerated. And when I get in there, it's like 1 in the morning, and this nurse comes into the room, a young nurse, and she says to me, "Can I get you anything?" And I says, "I need a shower." Because I went from the first hospital to get stitched up to solitary confinement, from solitary confinement back to the hospital. It's been going on for 16, 18 hours. I'm exhausted. I stink. I need a shower. She says, "No problem." She gets me all the shower stuff. So, and when she brings it, she says, "Do you want me to bathe you?" I said, "Do I want you to bathe me?" She goes, "Well, it's going to be hard for you to bathe with one hand, isn't it?" I said, "You're going to bathe me?" Yeah, no problem. She said, "Okay, go in there, get ready. I'll be in a minute." So when she comes in, I'm standing there in my boxer shorts, and she goes, "Do you usually shower in your boxer shorts?" I said, "You want me to get naked?" So the next thing you know, we were having sex, and good nurse. And then so I end up staying there for like 30 days. I didn't want to go back to solitary confinement. Who would want to go back to solitary confinement? And I also had the girlfriend I was seeing at the time coming to visit me, and they would take it in my room and drop her off and leave. The one officer was sitting 10 rooms away reading the newspaper, and I have my girlfriend in the room with me. I thought my girlfriend and the nurse were going to get into a fight. It was crazy. But so who wants to go back to jail, right? I said I should throw punches more often. Anyway, I end up, after all is said and done, I end up being sent back to Mid Orange after the solitary time, after the hospital time. I end up going back to Mid Orange, and they call me into the lieutenant's office, and he says to me, "Listen, we want to bring Buck back to the prison as well, because Buck got solitary confinement as well after the hospital." They said, "Is there going to be a problem between you two?" I says, "I don't have any problem. You know what I mean? I didn't have a problem to begin with. You know what I mean?" So, of course, I got a disciplinary ticket. I got a tier three disciplinary ticket for the fight. And so when I get into the hearing, she says, "All right, what happened?" It was a female lieutenant. I said, "What do you mean, what happened?" "Well, why'd you hit him?" I says, "I didn't hit anyone." "You didn't hit anyone?" "No, I didn't hit anyone." "You weren't in a fight?" "Nah, it wasn't me." The female lieutenant liked this. She was a female biker, like a Harley Davidson chick, a lesbian chick, and she didn't like rats. She didn't like snitches. So she said, "Listen, if it were me," she says, "I would have knocked all his teeth out." She says, "Because everybody knows the kid has a big mouth." I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." She said, "Time served on the solitary," and she put me in the population, and she said, "Is there going to be a problem with him?" I said, "There won't be a problem with him." So Buck comes back. And so now I see Buck after all of this. It's about over a month and a half later. They put us back in the population together. And he says to me, "Why'd you hit me?" "Why'd I hit you?" "Because you cursed me out. You came around the table. You stood in front of me like you wanted to fight. And your big mouth that I was saving you from for all your time that was here." I says, "I ended up being the one that have to hit you after all is said and done. 30 to 45 to 60 days before my parole board. So that wasn't good. And I didn't make parole. I was denied parole. I don't know if I was denied for that reason. They deny everyone. Parole is just a corrupt system in general. But that is what can happen when you're in prison, even when you don't ask for it. And that was the story about a fight inside of the prison system. I hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll talk to you later. Hey, let me know what you want to hear about in prison as well. You could let me know in the comments what you want to know about inside of the prison system, and I'll tell you about it. I'll see you guys later. Take care.